You will breed me now, human? Odin declared, her antennae twitching with a mixture of desperation and arousal as she faced Roy Skora in the dimly lit corridor of the Earth military base. The decorated soldier stared at the blue-skinned Andorian female, his mind reeling from the implications of her bold proposition. Just hours ago, he'd been a regular military liaison, tasked with greeting an alien delegation. Now, he found himself at the center of an interstellar reproductive crisis with far-reaching consequences for both species. The Andorian ship had landed on Earth earlier that day, its sleek silver hull gleaming under the hot sun. As the ramp lowered, Roy had steeled himself for first contact, never imagining the bizarre turn of events that would follow. The aliens emerged, led by Odin, a striking female with white hair and blue skin, who introduced herself as the mission's lead scientist. During the tense initial meeting, Roy struggled to focus as an unexpected wave of attraction washed over him. He'd later learn this was due to Odin's powerful alien pheromones, which affected human males with surprising intensity. The effect only grew stronger as the Andorians revealed the purpose of their visit, a proposal for human men to father Andorian children. Shock rippled through the room as Odin explained their dire situation. A genetic mutation had rendered Andorian males sterile, pushing their entire species to the brink of extinction. Extensive research had revealed that human DNA was surprisingly compatible with Andorian physiology, potentially offering a solution to their fertility crisis. As the human officials argued and debated, Roy found his gaze continually drawn to Odin. He noticed the worry lines creasing her forehead, the tension in her shoulders, and the hint of fear behind her determined expression. Despite his best efforts to remain professional, he felt a growing connection to the alien woman and her plight. Unknown to the gathered diplomats, a sinister force was already moving against them. A radical human supremacist group had caught wind of the Andorians' plan. Viewing any mixing of human and alien DNA as an abomination, they began plotting to sabotage the negotiations by any means necessary. As discussions grew heated and tempers flared, Odin made a decision. She cornered Roy in a quiet hallway, away from the chaos of the main conference room. Her antennae quivered as she spoke, voice low and intense. You must understand, Roy Skora, this isn't just about politics or science. It's about the survival of my entire species, Odin pleaded, her eyes locked onto his. Each day that passes, we draw closer to extinction. I came here not just as a scientist, but as an Andorian woman who dreams of bearing a child. Roy's heart raced as he processed her words. He was torn between his duty as a soldier, his growing attraction to Odin, and the ethical implications of interspecies breeding. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw not an alien, but a person, desperate, hopeful, and undeniably alluring. It was then that Odin uttered the words that would change everything. You will breed me now, human. Her voice trembled with a mixture of fear and desire, setting the stage for a romance that would challenge the boundaries between their species and potentially alter the course of human and Andorian history forever. Roy's mind raced as he processed Odin's bold declaration. The corridor seemed to close in around them, the air thick with tension and the alien pheromones that had been affecting him since their first encounter. Odin, Roy began, his voice husky with conflicting emotions. This is a lot to take in. We need to discuss this further, but not here. Follow me. He led her swiftly through the maze-like corridors of the military base, his training kicking in as he sought a more secure location. They arrived at a small conference room, its walls lined with monitors and a large table dominating the center. As the door sealed behind them with a soft hiss, Odin's antennae twitched, sensing Roy's unease. I understand your hesitation, Roy Skora. Allow me to explain the intricacies of what I am proposing. Over the next hour, Odin detailed the complexities of Andorian physiology, the proposed breeding process, and the potential implications for both their species. Roy listened intently, his military discipline warring with the growing attraction he felt towards the alien woman. The compatibility between our species is remarkable, Odin explained, her blue fingers dancing over a holographic display she had produced. The offspring would carry traits from both parents, potentially solving our genetic crisis while opening new avenues of scientific discovery for humanity. Roy leaned forward, fascinated despite himself. And you're certain this is safe? For both the mother and the child? Odin's expression softened. As certain as we can be, given the circumstances. But I wouldn't ask this of you if I didn't believe it was our best hope. Before Roy could respond, a deafening alarm shattered the moment. Red lights began flashing throughout the room as a computerized voice blared. Security breach. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Roy sprang into action, years of training taking over. We're under attack. Odin, stay close to me. They rushed from the conference room, the corridors now a chaos of flashing lights and panicked personnel. Roy's mind raced, assessing the situation even as he guided Odin through the commotion. Roy Skora to command, he barked into his communicator. What's our situation? A crackling voice responded. Skora, we've got multiple intruders. They've breached the outer defenses and are moving through the base. Intel suggests it's the Pure Earth group. Roy's eyes hardened. He'd heard whispers of the human supremacist organization, but never imagined they'd attempt something this bold. Understood. I'm escorting the Andorian delegate to a secure location. Keep me updated. As they rounded a corner, Roy spotted a group of armed intruders at the far end of the hallway. Their tactical gear was unmarked, but the Pure Earth insignia was visible on their sleeves. This way, Roy hissed, pulling Odin into a side passage. They sprinted through the narrow corridor, the sounds of gunfire and shouting growing louder behind them. They reached a reinforced door, and Roy quickly punched in a security code. The door slid open, revealing a small, windowless room filled with communications equipment. Get in, Roy ordered, ushering Odin inside before sealing the door behind them. Odin's antennae quivered as she took in their surroundings. What is this place? Secure Communications Hub, Roy explained, moving to a bank of monitors. It's shielded and has its own air supply. We should be safe here for now. As Roy worked to establish contact with base security, Odin paced the small room. The close quarters amplified her alien pheromones, and Roy found it increasingly difficult to focus. Roy, Odin said softly, moving closer to him, I can sense your elevated heart rate and perspiration. Are you all right? Roy turned to face her, suddenly acutely aware of how close they were standing. It's your pheromones. They're affecting me more strongly in this enclosed space. Odin's eyes widened in understanding. I see. Perhaps I can adjust my body's chemical output to... Her words were cut off as another explosion rocked the base, the force of it causing her to stumble forward. Roy caught her instinctively, his arms wrapping around her slender form. For a moment they stood frozen, bodies pressed together. Roy could feel the alien warmth of her skin, smell the exotic scent of her hair. Odin's antennae brushed against his cheek, sending an electric shiver down his spine. Roy, Odin whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Before she could finish, the communications console crackled to life. This is command to all personnel. The Pure Earth group has released an unknown biological agent into the base's ventilation system. All non-human personnel are to report to medical immediately for assessment and treatment. Roy and Odin broke apart, the gravity of the situation hitting them both. Odin's face paled, her blue skin taking on an almost ashen hue. A biological agent? She gasped. Roy, if they've engineered something to target Andorian physiology... We need to get you to medical, Roy said firmly, already moving towards the door. But first, we have to rescue your fellow delegates. He paused at a weapons locker near the door, quickly inputting another code. The locker opened, revealing an array of firearms. Roy selected a compact pulse rifle for himself, then hesitated before grabbing a smaller sidearm. Turning to Odin, he held out the weapon. Have you ever used anything like this before? Odin shook her head, her antennae drooping slightly. Okay, quick lesson, Roy said, demonstrating the basic functions of the weapon. Point, squeeze the trigger, and be prepared for the recoil. Only use it if absolutely necessary, understood? Odin nodded, her expression a mix of fear and willpower as she accepted the weapon. As Roy prepared to open the door, he turned back to Odin one last time. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a wordless understanding passed between them. Whatever happened next, they were in this together. With a deep breath, Roy unsealed the door, and they stepped out into the chaos of the besieged base, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As Roy and Odin emerged from the secure communications hub, the base was in utter chaos. Alarms blared, emergency lights flashed, and the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. They moved swiftly through the corridors, Roy's military training evident in his precise movements and constant vigilance. "We need to get you to medical immediately," Roy said, his voice tight with urgency. "That biological agent could be lethal to your physiology." Odin's antenna twitched nervously as she kept pace with him. "But what about my fellow delegates? We can't abandon them." Roy's mind focused as he weighed their options. The sound of gunfire erupted from a nearby hallway, making the decision for him. "We'll have to trust that the other security teams are handling their evacuation. Right now, our priority is your safety and finding a way to counteract this virus." They rounded a corner and came face to face with a group of pure Earth extremists. Roy reacted instantly, pushing Odin behind him and opening fire with his pulse rifle. The corridor lit up with energy blasts as he took down 2 attackers in quick succession. Odin, her hands shaking, raised the sidearm Roy had given her. She squeezed the trigger, the recoil catching her by surprise. Her shot went wide, scorching the wall beside one of the remaining extremists. "Stay behind me," Roy shouted, laying down suppressing fire as they retreated to cover behind a fallen piece of ceiling. As the firefight intensified, Odin's mind raced. The threat of the virus, combined with the violent assault on the base, forced her to confront a stark reality. Their original plan for careful negotiation and controlled experiments was no longer viable. They needed to act now if there was any hope of saving her species. In a moment of clarity between bursts of weapons fire, Odin grabbed Roy's arm. "Roy, listen to me. We can't wait any longer. We need to proceed with the conception immediately." Roy's eyes widened in shock. "What? Now? Odin, we're in the middle of a combat situation." "Exactly," Odin said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We don't know how long we have before this virus affects me. This might be our only chance to create a hybrid child that could hold the key to our survival." Roy's mind reeled as he processed her words. The ethical implications, the potential dangers, the sheer absurdity of the situation, all of it crashed through his thoughts in a matter of seconds. But as he looked into Odin's eyes, seeing the perseverance and fear mingled there, he knew she was right. "Okay," he said, his voice barely audible over the ongoing battle. "But we need to find a secure location and medical assistance." With renewed purpose, they fought their way through the base. Roy's expert marksmanship and tactical knowledge, combined with Odin's growing confidence with her weapon, allowed them to push through the pure Earth forces. They finally reached a sealed medical bay, its reinforced doors a welcome sight amidst the destruction. Roy quickly input his security code, and they rushed inside, sealing the entrance behind them. The medical bay was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Clean, white surfaces and advanced medical equipment filled the room. But their relief was short-lived as they realized they weren't alone. Dr. Elena Reeves, the base's chief medical officer, spun around at their entrance, her hand instinctively reaching for an emergency alert button. "At ease, Doctor," Roy said quickly, lowering his weapon. "We need your help." Dr. Reeves relaxed slightly but eyed them warily. "What's going on out there, and what do you need from me?" Odin stepped forward, her blue skin glistening with sweat from their frantic journey. "Doctor, I am Odin of the Andorian delegation. We require your assistance in a matter of utmost importance and extreme urgency." Over the next few minutes, Odin and Roy explained the situation, the virus, the Andorian fertility crisis, and their desperate plan. Dr. Reeves listened with growing astonishment, her professional curiosity warring with her ethical concerns. "What you're proposing is unprecedented," Dr. Reeves said, running a hand through her short graying hair. "The risks are enormous, both to you and any potential offspring." "We understand the risks," Odin said firmly, "but we have no choice. My people face extinction if we don't act now." Dr. Reeves looked from Odin to Roy, seeing the perseverance in both their faces. She took a deep breath and nodded. "All right, I'll help you. But I need to run some quick tests first to ensure basic compatibility and minimize the risks. As Dr. Reeves began her examinations, the sounds of battle outside intensified. Roy moved to the medical bay's security console, coordinating with the base's defense teams. "Sounds like Pure Earth is regrouping for another assault," he reported grimly. "They're specifically targeting this section of the base. Someone must have leaked information about our plan." Odin, lying on an examination table as Dr. Reeves took readings of her unique physiology, felt a chill run through her. "How long do we have?" Roy's fingers flew over the console as he accessed security feeds. "Not long, maybe 20 minutes before they breach the outer defenses of this section." Dr. Reeves looked up from her instruments, her face pale but determined. "That's not much time, but it will have to do. I've done all I can to prepare. Are you both absolutely certain you want to proceed?" Roy moved to Odin's side, taking her hand in his. Their eyes met, 1,000 unspoken words passing between them in that moment. "We're sure," they said in unison. As Dr. Reeves began the delicate procedure, the medical bay shook with a distant explosion. The battle was drawing closer, but inside the sterile room, a different kind of tension filled the air. Roy and Odin, thrown together by extraordinary circumstances, embarked on a journey that would change not just their lives, but potentially the future of two species. The next few minutes passed in a blur of medical terminology, gentle instructions from Dr. Reeves, and the constant background of alarms and distant combat. Roy, still reeling from the intensity of the experience, found himself forced back into soldier mode as the security console blared a warning. "They've breached the outer defenses," he announced, his voice hoarse. "I need to help coordinate our defense. Dr. Reeves, can you—" The doctor nodded without looking up from her work. "Go, I'll take care of Odin." Roy squeezed Odin's hand one last time before moving to the console, his mind racing as he tried to focus on tactics and push aside the emotional turmoil of what had just occurred. As he began coordinating with the base's security teams, Roy couldn't help but glance back at Odin. She lay still on the examination table, her blue skin pale, her antennae twitching with nervous energy. Despite the chaos surrounding them, a small spark of hope had been ignited. But whether it would be enough to save Odin, her people, and perhaps even humanity from the forces arrayed against them, remained to be seen. The medical bay's reinforced doors shuddered under a heavy impact. The battle was no longer distant. It had arrived at their doorstep. Roy checked his weapon, preparing for what was to come. Whatever happened next, he knew their lives would never be the same. The medical bay's reinforced doors shuddered under another heavy impact, the sound of metal straining against force echoing through the room. Roy's fingers flew over the security console, his mind racing to process the flood of incoming data. "They've breached the outer defenses," he announced, his voice tight with tension. "We need to move, now." As if in response to his words, the base-wide communication system crackled to life. General Harrison's authoritative voice filled the air, cutting through the chaos of alarms and distant explosions. "Attention all personnel. This is General Harrison. We are initiating full lockdown protocols. All non-essential staff report to secure bunkers immediately. Security teams, prepare for Level 5 containment procedures." Roy's eyes widened as he processed the implications. Level 5 was reserved for the most severe threats, ones that risked the entire base and potentially beyond. He turned to Dr. Reeves and Odin, who was slowly sitting up on the examination table. "We need to get you to a more secure location," Roy said, moving swiftly to Odin's side. "Can you walk?" Odin nodded, her antennae quivering slightly as she steadied herself. "I believe so. The procedure was intense, but I am functional." Dr. Reeves quickly gathered a set of portable medical equipment. "We need to continue monitoring her condition. The embryo is in a critical stage of development." As they prepared to leave, the security console lit up with a priority message. Roy scanned it quickly, his expression growing grim. "Pure Earth has brought in armed spacecraft. They're planning an aerial assault." Odin's face paled, her blue skin taking on an ashen hue. "Roy, if they destroy this base—" "They won't," Roy said firmly, checking his weapon. "General Harrison is activating our anti-aircraft defenses, but we need to get you to safety." They moved swiftly through the corridors, Roy taking point with his pulse rifle at the ready. The once pristine hallways of the base were now scarred with weapons fire and littered with debris. Emergency lights cast an eerie red glow, transforming the familiar environment into something alien and threatening. As they rounded a corner, they nearly collided with a group of soldiers in full combat gear. Roy recognized their leader, Captain Chen of the base's tactical response team. "Sergeant Roy," Chen said, relief evident in his voice. "We've been looking for you. General Harrison wants you to join the defense coordination." Roy hesitated, glancing back at Odin and Dr. Reeves. Chen followed his gaze, understanding dawning on his face. "Is this the Andorian delegate?" he asked. Roy nodded. Chen's expression hardened with drive. "We'll escort them to the underground bunker. It's the most secure location in the base." Roy knew he should feel relieved, but the thought of leaving Odin's side sent a spike of anxiety through him. He opened his mouth to protest, but Odin placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Go," she said softly. "Your skills are needed to protect everyone here. I'll be safe with them." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the full weight of what they had done, what they had created together, seemed to pass between them. Roy nodded, his throat tight. "I'll find you as soon as I can," he promised. As Roy watched Odin and Dr. Reeves disappear down the corridor with Chen's team, a distant explosion rocked the base. The battle was intensifying. He pushed aside his personal concerns and raced towards the command center, his military training kicking into high gear. The command center was a hive of frantic activity when Roy arrived. Technicians and officers moved with purposeful urgency, their voices a constant hum of updates and orders. At the center of it all stood General Harrison, his weathered face illuminated by the glow of tactical displays. "Sergeant," Harrison acknowledged Roy's arrival without taking his eyes off the main screen. "Sit rep?" Roy quickly briefed the general on the events in the medical bay and Odin's current status. Harrison's expression remained impassive, but Roy could see the calculations running behind his eyes. "The Andorian delegate's safety is now our top priority," Harrison declared. "If Pure Earth succeeds in eliminating her and the other Andorians, it could spark an interstellar incident we can't afford." He turned to Roy, his gaze intense. "I need you to coordinate our ground defenses. We've got reports of Pure Earth infiltrators inside the base. Root them out and secure our critical systems." Roy nodded, moving to a tactical station. As he began coordinating with the security teams scattered throughout the base, the air outside erupted with the sound of anti-aircraft fire. On the main display, Roy could see the Pure Earth spacecraft engaging with the base's defenses, the night sky lit up with energy weapons and explosions. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, as Roy directed the internal defense efforts. He couldn't shake the gnawing worry about Odin's safety, but he forced himself to focus on the task at hand. Lives depended on his concentration. Suddenly, an alarm blared from one of the monitoring stations. A technician's voice rang out, panic evident in her tone. "Sir, we've detected a breach in Section C, near the main power distribution hub." Roy's blood ran cold. Section C was dangerously close to the underground bunkers, where Odin and the other Andorians were sheltering. He turned to General Harrison, who nodded grimly. "Go," the general ordered. "Take a team and secure that section. We can't let them get near the Andorians or our power systems." Roy didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his pulse rifle and signaled to a nearby squad of soldiers. As they raced through the base's winding corridors, the sounds of battle grew louder. The infiltrators were pushing deeper into the facility. As they approached Section C, the acrid smell of weapons fire filled the air. Roy held up a fist, signaling his team to halt. Ahead, he could hear the sound of energy weapons discharging and the shouts of combat. Roy took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The fate of Odin, the embryo they had created, and potentially the future of human-Andorian relations hung in the balance. With a silent hand signal, he ordered his team to advance. They rounded the corner, weapons at the ready, prepared to face whatever Pure Earth had thrown in their path. The corridor ahead was filled with smoke and flashing emergency lights, obscuring their view of the battle that raged just beyond. Beyond. Roy's team moved swiftly, their weapons raised as they entered the smoke-filled corridor. The air crackled with energy discharges as Roy caught sight of pure Earth infiltrators exchanging fire with base security forces. He quickly assessed the situation, noting the enemy's positions and the vulnerable power distribution hub behind them. "Alpha Team, flank left," Roy ordered through his comm. "Bravo, with me. We're going to push through the center." As they advanced, Roy's mind raced with thoughts of Odin and the embryo. He forced himself to focus on the immediate threat, knowing that their safety depended on securing this section of the base. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Roy, over here!" Roy turned to see Marcus Steele, his former squad mate and now a known Pure Earth operative, emerge from the smoke. Steele's face was twisted with a mix of willpower and regret. "Stand down, Roy," Steele called out. "You don't understand what's at stake here." Roy's grip tightened on his weapon. "I understand perfectly, Marcus. You're trying to destroy any chance of peace between our species." Steele shook his head. "We're trying to save humanity from itself. This alliance will be the end of us." Before Roy could respond, a massive explosion rocked the base. The lights flickered, and Roy's comm crackled with urgent messages. "All units, be advised," General Harrison's voice came through. "Pure Earth spacecraft are intensifying their assault. Our anti-aircraft defenses are struggling to hold them off." Roy knew he had to end this quickly. He signaled to his team, and they surged forward, engaging Steele and his men in close-quarters combat. The air filled with the sound of pulse rifles and the acrid smell of ozone as energy beams crisscrossed the corridor. In the chaos, Roy found himself face-to-face with Steele. They grappled, their weapons forgotten as years of shared combat training manifested in a brutal hand-to-hand fight. "Think about what you're doing, Marcus," Roy grunted as he blocked a vicious strike. "This isn't you." Steele's eyes flashed with anger. "This is exactly who I am, who we all should be, defenders of humanity." Roy saw an opening and took it, landing a solid blow that sent Steele stumbling backward. As Steele fell, Roy noticed a small device attached to his former friend's belt, a detonator. Time seemed to slow as Roy lunged forward, wrenching the device from Steele's grasp and hurling it down the corridor. The resulting explosion sent shockwaves through the section, but the power hub remained intact. As the dust settled, Roy stood over the unconscious form of Marcus Steele. He allowed himself a moment of grief for the friendship lost before turning to his team. "Secure the prisoners and fortify this position," he ordered. "I need to get to the medical chamber." Roy raced through the damaged corridors, avoiding falling debris and electrical fires. His heart pounded with each step, driven by an inexplicable sense of urgency. As he approached the medical chamber, he saw Alex helping Odin through the reinforced doors. "Roy," Odin called out, her voice strained. "Something's wrong." Dr. Reeves appeared at the doorway, her face etched with concern. "Quick, get her inside. The embryo's development has accelerated dramatically." Roy rushed to Odin's side, supporting her as they entered the shielded chamber. He could feel the heat radiating from her blue skin, her antennae twitching erratically. "What's happening to her?" Roy demanded as they helped Odin onto the examination table. Dr. Reeves activated a series of holographic displays, her fingers flying over the controls. The unique combination of human and Andorian DNA, coupled with the stress of the attack, has triggered an unprecedented rapid gestation. If we can't stabilize the process, we could lose them both. Roy's blood ran cold at the doctor's words. He gripped Odin's hand, feeling helpless as she writhed in pain. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness. The medical equipment sputtered and died as the base's power grid failed. "No, no, no," Dr. Reeves muttered, frantically trying to restart the systems. "We need that equipment to sustain her." Roy's military training kicked in. "What do you need, Doctor?" "We need to manually stabilize her condition," Dr. Reeves said, pulling out emergency medical kits. "Roy, I need you to monitor her vital signs while I administer the treatment." As Roy placed his hands on Odin's temples to check her neural responses, a jolt of energy surged through him. Suddenly, he was awash in a sea of alien sensations. The rapid beat of Odin's hearts, the swirling mix of human and Andorian DNA, and at the center of it all, a tiny spark of consciousness reaching out to him. Roy gasped, nearly pulling away. Doctor, I can feel the embryo. It's trying to communicate. Dr. Reeves looked up sharply. That's impossible, unless... She trailed off, her scientific mind racing with possibilities. Before they could explore this new development, the chamber's doors burst open. Sergeant Maria Reed and her team rushed in, their weapons at the ready. Sergeant Roy, Reed called out, her voice urgent. General Harrison's orders. We need to evacuate immediately. Pure Earth reinforcements have breached the outer perimeter. Roy looked down at Odin, her face contorted in pain, then back to Dr. Reeves. Can we move her? The doctor nodded grimly. We have to, but we need to be extremely careful. As they prepared to transfer Odin to a stretcher, Roy maintained physical contact with her, feeling the embryo's distress pulsing through their newfound connection. He didn't understand how or why, but he knew this link was now critical to their survival. Let's move, Roy ordered, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. We need to get to the underground hangar. As they lifted Odin onto the stretcher, a massive explosion rocked the base. Alarms blared, and the emergency lights cast an eerie red glow over the scene. Roy took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. With one hand on his weapon and the other maintaining contact with Odin, he led the group out of the medical chamber and into the chaos of the besieged base. The future of two species rested in their hands, and Roy knew that every step, every decision from this point on could mean the difference between salvation and extinction. As they navigated the treacherous path to the hangar, Roy silently vowed to protect Odin and their unborn child, at any expense. Cost. As they navigated the treacherous path to the hangar, Roy silently vowed to protect Odin and their unborn child, at any cost. The group had barely made it halfway to the hangar when Dr. Reeves's portable medical scanner began emitting a series of urgent beeps. She glanced at the readout, her face paling. We need to stop, she announced, her voice tight with concern. Odin's condition is deteriorating rapidly. Roy felt a surge of panic through his connection with Odin. The embryo's distress was palpable, a frantic pulse that seemed to resonate through his very being. He looked around frantically, spotting a reinforced door marked Emergency Medical Bay just a few meters ahead. In there, he ordered, gesturing to the door with his weapon. Reed, secure the perimeter. As they rushed Odin into the room, Roy was relieved to see it was well-equipped with advanced medical technology. Dr. Reeves immediately began connecting Odin to the various monitoring devices, while Roy maintained physical contact, his hand clasped tightly around Odin's. The door slid open, revealing Dr. Tanaka, the base's lead xenobiologist. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene before her. Dr. Reeves, what's the situation? She asked, moving swiftly to join them. Dr. Reeves' fingers flew over the medical console. The embryo's growth has accelerated beyond anything we've seen. It's putting immense strain on Odin's system. We need to stabilize them both, fast. Dr. Tanaka's gaze fell on Roy, noting his hand on Odin's. You said you could feel a connection with the embryo? Roy nodded, his voice strained. It's like a presence in my mind. I can feel its distress. Dr. Tanaka's eyes lit up with a mix of scientific curiosity and desperate hope. We might be able to use that. I have an experimental procedure that could save them both, but it's untested. Roy looked at Odin's pain-racked face, then back to Dr. Tanaka. Do it, he said firmly. Whatever it takes. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Roy watched as Dr. Tanaka and her team wheeled in a large, cylindrical chamber filled with a strange, shimmering fluid. They carefully transferred Odin into the chamber, submerging her in the nutrient-rich, amniotic-like substance. This fluid is designed to support both Andorian and human physiology, Dr. Tanaka explained as she worked. It should help stabilize Odin while we address the embryo's accelerated growth. Roy stood by the chamber, his hand pressed against the transparent surface. Even through the barrier, he could feel the connection with Odin and their child pulsing strongly. Dr. Tanaka approached him, her expression serious. Roy, we need you to maintain that psychic link. It could be crucial in helping Odin and the embryo through this process. Roy nodded, steeling himself for whatever was to come. As Dr. Tanaka activated the chamber, He felt a sudden surge of energy coursing through his body. The connection with Odin and the embryo intensified, becoming a vivid, almost overwhelming presence in his mind. Through their link, Roy could sense the rapid changes occurring within Odin's body. The embryo was growing at an astonishing rate, its unique hybrid DNA rewriting the rules of gestation. He gritted his teeth, focusing all his will on providing strength and stability through their connection. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. General Harrison's voice crackled over the intercom, tension evident in his tone. All personnel, be advised. Pure Earth forces have tracked us to this location. They're launching a full-scale assault on the base. All combat-ready personnel report to defensive positions immediately. Roy's heart raced, torn between his duty as a soldier and his desperate need to stay with Odin. Before he could make a decision, General Harrison burst into the room, his uniform showing signs of recent combat. "Sergeant," Harrison barked, "I need you to stay here and protect this chamber at all costs. This may be our only chance to save the Andorian species and secure lasting peace." Roy nodded, grateful for the order that aligned with his own desires. "Yes, sir. What about the rest of the base?" "I'll coordinate the counterattack," Harrison replied, already moving towards the door. "Sergeant Reed and her squad will establish a perimeter around this medical bay. Hold this position, no matter what." As Harrison left, Roy turned back to the chamber. Through the transparent walls, he could see Odin's face contorted in pain. The monitors showed her vital signs fluctuating wildly as the hybrid embryo continued its accelerated development. Dr. Tanaka worked feverishly at the control panel, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The embryo's growth is exceeding our projections," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "We're barely keeping up with the changes." Roy pressed his hand harder against the chamber, focusing all his energy on the psychic link. He could feel Odin's pain, her fear, but also her persistence. Beneath it all was the rapidly evolving consciousness of their child, a swirling vortex of human and Andorian thoughts and instincts. The sounds of battle grew closer, energy weapons discharged in the corridors outside, and the acrid smell of smoke began to seep into the room. Roy torn between maintaining his connection with Odin and preparing for the imminent attack. Suddenly, Dr. Tanaka gasped, her eyes wide as she stared at a readout on her screen. "This is incredible," she breathed. "The hybrid embryo is developing unique biological characteristics. If I'm reading this correctly, it could potentially neutralize the engineered virus affecting the Andorians." A surge of hope coursed through Roy, quickly tempered by Dr. Tanaka's next words. "But extracting this cure, it would put enormous strain on both Odin and the child. We could lose them both in the process." Before Roy could respond, the door to the medical bay burst open. Sergeant Reed stumbled in, her armor scorched and a fresh cut bleeding on her forehead. "Pure Earth forces have breached the outer defenses," she reported breathlessly. "They're headed this way, led by Veronica Hawthorne herself." Roy's blood ran cold at the mention of Hawthorne, the notorious Pure Earth extremist known for her ruthless tactics and xenophobic fervor. He looked back at the chamber, where Odin floated in the shimmering fluid, their unborn child growing within her at an impossible rate. In that moment, Roy knew that everything, the fate of Odin, their child, the Andorian species, and perhaps the future of human-alien relations, hinged on what happened in the next few minutes. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the battle to come, his hand never leaving the surface of the chamber that held his family in the hope for a new future. Roy's hand pressed against the chamber, his entire being focused on the psychic link with Odin and their unborn child. The sounds of battle drew closer, but he remained steadfast, determined to protect his family at all costs. Suddenly, the chamber began to emit a high-pitched whine. Dr. Tanaka's eyes widened in alarm as she frantically worked the controls. "The energy output is off the charts," she shouted over the noise. "The chamber can't contain it." Before anyone could react, a blinding flash of energy erupted from the chamber, engulfing Roy, Odin, and their child. The room filled with a brilliant white light, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. As the light faded, Roy blinked rapidly, trying to clear his vision. He felt different. His skin tingled, and he was aware of new sensations coursing through his body. Looking down at his hands, he saw a faint blue tint to his skin. "Roy," Odin's voice, weak but steady, drew his attention. He turned to see the chamber had opened, and Odin was sitting up, cradling a small bundle in her arms. Roy moved to her side with surprising speed and grace, his movements fluid and precise in a way they had never been before. "Is that—" Roy's voice trailed off as he gazed at the infant in Odin's arms. The child was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its skin was a pale lavender, with faint blue markings reminiscent of Odin's. Tiny antennae, barely visible, twitched above a shock of dark hair. As the baby opened its eyes, Roy saw they were a striking shade of green, a perfect blend of his own brown eyes and Odin's blue ones. Dr. Tanaka approached, her medical scanner humming as she passed it over all three of them. "Incredible," she breathed. "Roy, your DNA has been partially rewritten. You've taken on some Andorian characteristics. And the child, it's a perfect hybrid, stable and healthy." A surge of joy and wonder filled Roy as he looked at his new family. However, the moment was short-lived as Sergeant Reed's voice cut through the air. "They're coming! Hawthorne's leading the charge!" Roy's newly enhanced senses picked up the sound of rapidly approaching footsteps. Without thinking, he moved to intercept the attackers, his body reacting with superhuman speed and agility. The door burst open, and Veronica Hawthorne stormed in, flanked by her Pure Earth soldiers. Her eyes widened in shock as she took in Roy's altered appearance. "What have you done?" she snarled, raising her weapon. Roy moved faster than he thought possible, closing the distance between them in the blink of an eye. He disarmed Hawthorne with a quick twist of her wrist, then used her own momentum to flip her over his shoulder. The other Pure Earth soldiers rushed him, but Roy found himself easily dodging their attacks, his body moving with fluid grace. As he fought, Roy was acutely aware of every movement, every shift in the air around him. He could sense the soldiers' intentions before they acted, allowing him to stay one step ahead. Within minutes, the Pure Earth forces lay incapacitated on the ground, with Roy standing unscathed among them. General Harrison burst into the room with a squad of soldiers, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. "Sergeant Roy, what happened to you?" Before Roy could respond, Dr. Tanaka interjected, her voice filled with excitement. "General, we've done it. The hybrid child's DNA has provided the key to curing the engineered virus. I'm synthesizing the antidote now." Harrison's face lit up with hope. "That's excellent news, Doctor. And the Pure Earth threat?" "Neutralized, sir," Roy reported, gesturing to the subdued attackers. "Hawthorne and her team are ready for arrest." As Harrison's men secured the prisoners, Roy returned to Odin's side. She looked up at him, her antennae twitching with a mix of emotions. "You've changed," she said softly, reaching out to touch his faintly blue-tinged skin. Roy took her hand, marveling at how much more he could feel through his enhanced senses. "We've all changed," he replied, looking down at their child. "But we're together, and we're safe." Dr. Tanaka approached with a vial of clear liquid. "The antidote is ready. We should administer it to the affected Andorian delegates immediately." As the doctor left to treat the Andorians, General Harrison turned to Roy and Odin. "You two have just changed the course of human-Andorian relations. The implications of this are staggering." Roy nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He knew that their lives would never be the same, that they now stood at the forefront of a new era of interspecies cooperation. "Sir," Roy said, straightening his posture, "what happens now?" Harrison's expression was a mix of uncertainty and purpose. "Now, we face the future. The world will need to know about this. We'll need to prepare for the reactions, both positive and negative." Odin spoke up, her voice stronger now. "My people will want to know as well. This will change everything for the Andorians." As if on cue, a communication officer burst into the room. "General, sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Andorian High Council. They're sending a delegation to Earth immediately." Roy and Odin exchanged glances, both aware that their personal miracle was about to become a matter of interstellar diplomacy. Their child, still unnamed, gurgled softly in Odin's arms, blissfully unaware of the monumental changes it had sparked. "We should name her," Roy said softly, gently stroking the baby's cheek. "She's going to need a name that represents both of our worlds." Odin nodded, her antennae curling in thought. "What about Lyra? It's a constellation visible from both Earth and Andoria." Roy smiled, feeling a surge of love for his newfound family. "Lyra," he repeated, testing the name. "It's perfect." As they stood together, Roy, Odin, and little Lyra, they knew they were at the beginning of a journey that would reshape the galaxy. The challenges ahead were numerous, explaining Roy's transformation, introducing Lyra to both human and Andorian societies, and navigating the complex world of interspecies politics. But for now, in this moment of calm after the storm, they simply held each other close, a family forged in the fires of conflict and united by love that transcended the boundaries of species. Species. The challenges ahead were numerous, but Roy and Odin were ready to face them together. Their moment of peace was short-lived. A high-priority alert flashed on the main screen, drawing everyone's attention. General Harrison rushed to the console, his face grim as he read the incoming message. "We've got a situation," he announced, his voice tense. "The Andorian High Council just sent an urgent communication. A group of Andorian extremists has launched an attack on Earth's orbital defense platforms." Roy's enhanced senses picked up the sudden spike in heart rates around the room. He exchanged a worried glance with Odin, who clutched Lyra closer to her chest. "What are their demands?" Roy asked, already anticipating the answer. Harrison's heart made. "They're not making any. It seems they're opposed to the hybridization program. They fear it will lead to the dilution of the Andorian species." Odin's antenna drooped in dismay. "I should have anticipated this. There were always whispers of discontent among certain factions back home." Roy placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, feeling the tension in her muscles. "We couldn't have known they'd go this far. What's our next move, General?" Harrison straightened, his eyes scanning the room. "We need to act fast. This attack could derail everything we've worked for. Roy, given your new enhancements, I want you to lead a joint human-Andorian task force to neutralize this threat." Roy nodded, a surge of persistence coursing through him. He turned to Odin, expecting to see relief on her face at being excluded from the dangerous mission. Instead, he found determination etched in her features. "I'm coming too," Odin declared, her voice brooking no argument. "My knowledge of Andorian tactics and technology could be crucial." Roy opened his mouth to protest, but the look in Odin's eyes silenced him. He knew that fierce willpower all too well. "What about Lyra?" he asked softly. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward. "I can take care of her here in the secure facility. She'll be safe, I promise." With a heavy heart, Odin handed Lyra to the doctor. The child, sensing the tension in the room, began to fuss. Roy leaned in, gently stroking Lyra's cheek with his newly blue-tinged hand. "We'll be back soon, little one," he whispered, marveling at how his enhanced hearing could pick up the rapid flutter of her tiny heart. Within the hour, Roy and Odin found themselves aboard the USS Harmony, a prototype vessel that showcased the rapid technological integration between humans and Andorians. The ship hummed with energy as it broke free of Earth's atmosphere, its sleek design a testament to the collaborative effort of both species' greatest minds. Roy stood on the bridge, his enhanced senses taking in every detail of the ship's operations. He could feel the subtle vibrations of the engines, hear the minute adjustments of the life support systems, and even sense the electrical impulses flowing through the ship's neural network. As they approached the orbital platforms, Roy's newly heightened awareness sparked to life. He turned to the tactical officer, his eyes narrowing. "There's something out there. Cloaked ships, at least 3 of them." The officer looked skeptical, but ran a deep scan. Moments later, his eyes widened in surprise. "Confirmed, sir. 3 Andorian vessels using an advanced cloaking technology we've never encountered before." Odin, who had been monitoring communications, spoke up. "I'm picking up encrypted transmissions between the ships. Give me a moment to decode them." Roy watched in amazement as Odin's fingers flew over the console, her mind working in perfect harmony with the ship's systems. In mere seconds, she had broken through layers of encryption that would have taken the most advanced human computers hours to crack. "I've got it," she announced, her antennae twitching with concern. "They're planning to detonate a weapon that would render Earth's atmosphere uninhabitable for Andorians. It would effectively end any chance of further hybridization." A tense silence fell over the bridge. Roy's mind raced, processing the information and formulating a plan with lightning speed. He turned to the helm officer. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We need to get close enough to disable their weapons without giving away our position." As the USS Harmony glided silently through space, Roy could sense the rising tension among the crew. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and he knew that the next few moments would determine the future of human-Andorian relations. "Odin," he said, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation, "can you pinpoint the location of the weapon?" Odin's fingers danced across the console once more. "It's on the largest ship directly ahead of us. But Roy, their shields are unlike anything I've seen before. We can't penetrate them with our weapons." Roy's enhanced mind quickly processed the information, formulating and discarding plans in rapid succession. Suddenly, an idea struck him. It was risky, but it might be their only chance. "We're going to board that ship," he announced, drawing surprised looks from the crew. "Sergeant Reed, assemble a small team. We're going in." As Reed hurried to comply, Roy turned to Odin. Their eyes met, a silent communication passing between them. Despite the danger ahead, they both knew this was what they had to do. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, fighting not just for their own future, but for the future of both their peoples. The USS Harmony surged forward, its advanced stealth systems keeping it hidden from the extremist sensors. As they closed in on the lead ship, Roy prepared himself for the most crucial mission of his life. With Odin by his side and his new hybrid abilities at the ready, he steeled himself for the battle to come.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.